Welcome to the soybean field, obviously, today. This is site number 1 for soybeans. This field was planted around early May, about May 14th. If you look down here, this growth stage of these soybeans are just entering the first trifoliate stage. The first two things that come out of the ground are the cotyledons, the brains of the soybean plant. The next to come out is the unifoliate, and the next to come out then is the various trifoliate stages of soybeans. We will then eventually hit the R1 stage, which is a critical juncture. R1 is the initiation of flowering, and we'll talk about some management tips when we get to that stage. This field was planted mid-May. This field here was hit with the vertical tillage tool and planted. I still believe that's the answer to set up most planters, whether it be the corn planter or the bean planter, because we're looking for uniformity in soybeans as we are in corn. It matters just as much in soybeans, the uniformity, the standards that came up on time, that are full vigor and height and stems same size, versus a skip or a gap and or double or delayed emergers. So we'll continue flagging some soybean things as we go here in site number 1 and site number 2. But we'll give these soybeans a net effective plant stand rating as well. Because if you think soybeans can compensate for thinner stands or lack of uniformity or coming up late, then you've just about guaranteed you're going to be an average soybean producer. Don't make soybeans compensate. My philosophy has been, if you make them compensate, you tend not to get over 50 or 52 bushel yields. This grower here in Henry County, Illinois, just a little bit south of Atkinson, Illinois, harvested 80 bushel beans was his average on all of his bean fields last year. 80 bushel beans. It took a lot to get that, a lot of little things and some big things. Okay, again, unifoliate stage here. Look at the spacing. I took a population check here. I use a 2x2 method, 2 foot by 2 foot method. Count the number of plants in a 2 foot by 2 foot square times 11,000 gives you your exact population. We dropped about 165,000 here, and we got 155,000 final stand. That's a real good ratio of what we're looking for here. Look at the weed control also. We have impeccable weed control as you scan across this field. Weed control is just as important as corn as is in soybeans, and we'll manage late season weed control later. Another management tip coming up on soybeans in the next few weeks is going to be that early fungicide pass and a micronutrient pass with that fungicide, especially for applying Roundup. I always apply micronutrients, including a high rate of manganese, whenever I apply glyphosate-based herbicides in all my bean fields. It helps digest that Roundup, which is exuded through the root systems. This is site number 2. Remember, site number 1 was conventional tilled corn on corn, where it was aggressively fall tilled and then field cultivated this spring, led to a lot of skips and gaps and partial producers in that stand for corn. We're going to actually take some corn plants now and evaluate some things below ground. Most of the issues, if you're seeing any issues above ground, the above ground portion is the symptomology portion, with the causal agents usually below ground. So above ground can tell you something's not right, but usually the issues are below ground with either root development or nutrient deficiencies or things like this, or even insect feeding sometimes. I want to show you some things here. Roots in general are very lazy. They will grow to the level of least resistance every time. This is not sidewall compaction, but the disc openers ran here, and you can see that the biggest configuration of roots are where the disc openers ran and opened up a crack or fissure there. Also, this has starter fertilizer in furrow. 3 gallons of very high quality, ortho-based with micronutrients. And those roots will proliferate dramatically in that starter band as well as quick into the plant. Those roots will generally explode and proliferate down through that starter band. Up until about this stage of growth, which is about almost 20 inches, root growth below ground should equal plant growth above ground. So root penetration below ground should equal above ground growth up until about this stage. And then corn starts to develop a new leaf every 3.5 days this time of year, and above ground growth can grow 3 and 4 inches a day sometime in these fields, and thus root penetration can't quite keep up with that pace at that point in time. What I'm looking for here is white roots. White, healthy roots that have penetrated the entire profile is what we're looking for. We're obviously very moist here. We've got upwards of 1.5 inches, 2 inches of rain over the last 72 hours. Lots of penetration down, lots of new ones coming here. We're going to dig another one. That was a standard. I'm going to dig one that was slightly off the pace. And I know I'm tearing off some of the roots that I went farther down in the profile. So we have lots of roots still in the profile, but if you look in that starter band where those disc openers ran, that's where the highest concentration of roots are, but we're also getting really good lateral growth left and right as well. Every hybrid has its own unique root development pattern. Some root systems are larger than others, some are more coarse, some are finer than others. We're also going to split this plant open. And see where the growing point is. If you can look right there, the growing point is right there with that corn plant. When that growing point comes up and comes out of the ground, is when about this stage here is we determine rows around. That growing point leaves below ground and comes above ground at about V5 or V6. At that point in time, we determine rows around to that ear of this hybrid. And then about 4, 5, 6 leaves later at V10, we will determine kernels long, the number of kernels long. But today, or somewhere over the last few days, we've determined rows around in this corn plant. That's going to be a very critical process of determining yields, rows around, and then kernels long. Okay. This is site number 3 of the corn, Henry County, Illinois, a little bit southeast of Geneseo, Illinois, south of Atkinson. What we're looking at here is site number 3. It's the latest planted, but it's also, what we're going to see is probably the most uniform of all yet. Site number 1 was planted into fluff conditions. After a field cultivator, immediately after it was field cultivated, we had some issues there of gaps, delayed emergers. Population wasn't too bad. Site number 2, vertical tilled, corn on corn. Very good looking site, very uniform overall. A few minor imperfections in the stand, but look at here. Look at these orange flags here. That's what we're looking for. Every plant the same shape, the same height, same rows, same spacing between plants, same stalk diameters, and no gaps. As you scan across the field here, you'll see a version of that. Very few gaps. Lots of plants that look the same. That's what corn plants want. All come up the same day when they start to emerge, preferably. All the same height, all the same stalk diameters is what we're looking for. We made the adjustment here in the other field before we even came here to go, we set the planter 2 notches deeper when we first started planting corn and backed him off 1 full miles an hour. We were somewhere between 3.9 and 4.1 miles an hour is what we deemed was where we had to be at for that field and this one as well. We had to do a little bit of field cultivating here because this field was tiled this spring, and that's why I believe this field here is one of my crown jewels that I work with now. Well drained, high fertility, and plant stand this way is going to solve a lot of problems in modern day corn production. Also look, we have no weed pressure out here. We control early with safe herbicides. We're going to come back here and put this to bed with a little bit of glyphosate-based herbicide and or maybe a little bit of callisto-atrazine in here if we have any broadleaf issues, possibly. But this field's going to be put to bed a lot sooner than you think. Even though we're at a growth stage here. Growth stage here right now, keep in mind, that first leaf is a flag leaf. It's not a true leaf. Leaf number V1, V2, V3, V4, V4 and a half is where we are right here. What's happening here? The ear shoot has been initiated already, and somewhere over the next 10 days, 7 to 10 days, this thing will determine rows around on the ear. And that's going to be a real good thing here. This thing was planted in more the first week or so of May. It missed some of the bad early cold wetter rains. came out of the ground in a very short number of days, very uniform. We have about a 31,000 final here, 36-inch rows, ironically also, not a lot of 36-inch rows around, but this row width is not a determiner of yield in my mind. Stand quality and stand quantity and fertility determines yields, not row width in my mind in most cases. Okay, very good looking field of corn. Again, some of these white flags here are just maybe one leaf behind. I had a few others in this run of corn that was about a half a leaf behind that I called an orange flag. 2 true delayed emergers here that were 1 leaf behind. Everything else, look at that. And as you go up and down these rows, it's not hard to pick a row that's going to mirror that as well. Most of this field is going to mirror what this is right here.